Hey guys, welcome back to Storytime with Andy. Go Beavs. They won the first game of the College World Series in Omaha. What a great game. Go Beavers. But we're not here to talk baseball. We're here to talk about The One Thing by Gary Keller. We're still in part one, which is the lies. They mislead and derail us. Chapter 8, A Balanced Life. Quote, "The truth is, balance is bunk. It is an unattainable pipe dream. The quest for balance between work and life, as we come to think of it, isn't just a losing proposition. It is a hurtful, destructive one." Unquote. Keith H. Hammonds. Nothing ever achieves absolute balance. Nothing. No matter how imperceptible it might be, what appears to be state of balance is something entirely different, an act of balancing. Viewed wistfully as a noun, balance is lived practically as a verb. Seen as something we ultimately attain, balance is actually something we constantly do. A balanced life is a myth, a misleading concept most accept as a worthy and attainable goal without ever stopping to truly consider it. I want you to consider it. I want you to challenge it. I want you to reject it. A balanced life is a lie. The idea of balance is exactly that, an idea. In philosophy, the golden mean is the moderate middle between polar extremes, a concept used to describe a place between two positions that is more desirable than one state or the other. This is a grand idea, but not a very practical one. Idealistic, but not realistic. Balance doesn't exist. This is tough to conceive, much less believe, mainly because one of the most frequent laments is, "I need more balance." A common mantra for what's missing in most lives. We hear about balance so much, we automatically assume it's exactly what we should be seeking. It's not. Purpose, meaning, significance. These are what make a successful life. Good point. Seek them and you will most certainly live your life out of balance, crisscrossing an invisible middle line as you pursue your priorities. The act of living a full life by giving time to what matters is a balancing act. Extraordinary results require focused attention and time. Time on one thing means time away from another. This makes balance impossible. The genesis of a myth. Historically, balancing our lives is a novel privilege to even consider. For thousands of years, work was life. If you didn't work, meaning hunt game, harvest crops, or raise livestock, you didn't live long. But things changed. Jared Diamond's Pulitzer Prize-winning Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Fates of Human Societies, illustrates how farm-based societies that generated a surplus of food ultimately gave rise to a professional specialization. 12,000 years ago, everybody on Earth was a hunter-gatherer. Now almost all of us are farmers, or else are fed by farmers. This freedom from having to forage or farm allowed people to become scholars and craftsmen. Some worked to put food on our tables while others built the tables. At first, most people worked according to their needs and ambitions. The blacksmith didn't have to stay at the forge until 5 p.m. He could go home when the horse's feet were shod. The 19th century industrialization saw for the first time large numbers working for someone else. The story became one of hard-driving bosses, year-round work schedules, and lighted factories that ignored dawn and dusk. Consequently, the 20th century witnessed the start of a significant grassroots movement to protect workers and limit work hours. Still, the term work-life balance wasn't coined until the mid-1980s, when more than half of all married women joined the workforce. To paraphrase Ralph E. Gomery's preface to the 2005 book, Being Together, Working Apart, Dual Career Families, and the Work-Life Balance, We went from a family unit with a breadwinner and a homemaker to one with 2 breadwinners and no homemaker. Anyone with a pulse knows who got stuck with the extra work in the beginning. However, by the 90s, work-life balance had quickly become a common watchword for men, too. A LexisNexis survey of top 100 newspapers and magazines around the world shows a dramatic rise in the number of articles on the topic, from 32 in the decade from 86 to 96, to a high of 1,674 articles in 2007 alone. It's probably not a coincidence that the ramp-up of technology parallels the rise of the belief that something is missing in our lives. Infiltrated space and fewer boundaries will do that. Rooted in real-life challenges, the idea of work-life balance has clearly captured our minds and imagination. The desire for balance makes sense. Enough time for everything, and everything done in time. It sounds so appealing that just thinking about it makes us feel serene and peaceful. This calm is so real that we just know it's the way of life was meant to be. But it's not. If you think of balance as the middle, then out of balance is when you're far away from it. Get too far away from the middle and you're living at the extremes. The problem with living in the middle is that it prevents you from making extraordinary time commitments to anything. If in your effort to attend to all things, everything gets shortchanged and nothing gets done or gets its due. Sometimes this can be okay and sometimes not. Knowing when to pursue the middle and when to pursue the extremes is in essence the true beginning of wisdom. Extraordinary results are achieved by this negotiation with your time. The reason we shouldn't pursue balance is that the magic never happens in the middle. Magic happens at the extremes. The dilemma is that chasing the extremes presents real challenges. We naturally understand that success lies at the outer edges, but we don't know how to manage our lives while we're out there. When we work too long, eventually our personal life suffers, falling prey to the belief that long hours are virtuous. It's just the opposite. Even if our work life doesn't interfere, our personal life itself can be so full of have-tos that we again reach the same defeated conclusion. I have no life. And sometimes we get hit from both sides. Some of us face so many personal and professional demands that everything suffers. Breakdown imminent, we once again declare, I have no life. Just like playing to the middle, playing to the extremes is the kind of middle management that plays out all the time. My wife once told me the story of a friend of hers. The friend's mother was a school teacher and her father was a farmer. They had scrimped, saved, and done with less their entire lives in anticipation of retirement and travel. The woman finally remembered the regular shopping trips she and her mother would take to the local fabric store where they would pick out some fabric and patterns. The mother explained that when she retired, these would be her travel clothes. She never got to her retirement years. In her final year of teaching, she developed cancer and later died. The father never felt good about spending the money they'd saved, believing that it was their money, and now she wasn't there to share it with him. Kind of sounds like that movie Up, doesn't it? When he passed away and my wife's friend went to clean out her parents' home, she discovered a closet full of fabric and dress patterns. The father had never cleaned it out. He couldn't. It represented too much. It was as if its contents were so full of unfulfilled promises that they were too heavy to lift. Time waits for no one. Push something to an extreme and postponement can become permanent. I once knew a highly successful businessman who had worked long days and weekends for most of his life, sincere in his belief that he was doing it all for his family. Someday, when he was done, they would all enjoy the fruits of his labor, spend time together, travel, and do all the things they'd never done before. After giving many years to building his company, he had recently sold it and was open to discussing what might be next. I asked him how he was doing, and he proudly proclaimed that he was fine. When I was building the business, I was never home and rarely saw my family. So now I'm with them on vacation, making up for lost time. You know how it is, right? Now that I have the money and the time, I'm getting those years back. Do you really think you can ever get back a child's bedtime story or birthday? Is a party for a 5-year-old with imaginary pals the same as dinner with a teenager with high school friends? Is an adult attending a young child's soccer game on par with attending a soccer game with an adult child? Do you think that you can cut a deal with God that time stands still for you, holding off anything important until you're ready to participate again? When you gamble with your time, you may be placing a bet you can't recover or can't cover. When you gamble with time, you may be placing a bet you can't cover. Even if you're sure you can win, be careful that you can live with what you lose. Toying with time can lead you down a rabbit hole with no way out. Believing this lie does its harm by convincing you to do things you shouldn't and stop doing things that you should. Mental mismanagement can be one of the most destructive things you ever do. You can't ignore the inevitability of time, so if achieving balance is a lie, then what do? You counterbalance. Replace the word balance with counterbalance, and what you experience makes sense. The things we presume to have balance are really just counterbalancing. The ballerina is a classic example. When the ballerina poses on point, she can appear weightless, floating in air. The very idea of balance and grace, making minute adjustments for balance. Counterbalancing done well gives the illusion of balance. Counterbalancing, the long and short of it. When we say we're out of balance, we're usually referring to a sense that some priorities, things that matter to us, are being underserved or unmet. The problem is that when you focus on what is truly important, something will always be undeserved. No matter how hard you try, there will always be things left undone at the end of the day, the week, or the month, or the year, or the life. Trying to get all of them done is folly. When the things that matter most get done, you'll still be left with a sense of things being undone, a sense of imbalance. Leaving some things undone is a necessary trade-off for extraordinary results, but you can't leave everything undone. And that's where counterbalancing comes in. The idea of counterbalancing is that you never go so far that you can't find your way back, or stay so long that there is nothing waiting for you when you return. This is so important that your very life may hang in the balance. An 11-year study of nearly 7,100 British civil servants concluded that habitual long hours can be deadly. Researchers showed that individuals who worked more than 11 hours a day, a 55-plus hour work week, were 67% more likely to suffer from heart disease. Counterbalancing is not only about your sense of well-being, it's essential to your being well. There are two types of counterbalancing: the balancing between work and personal life, and the balancing within each. In the world of professional success, it's not about how much overtime you put in. The key ingredient is focus time over time. To achieve an extraordinary result, you must choose what matters most and give it all the time it demands. This requires getting extremely out of balance in relation to all other work issues, with only infrequent counterbalancing to address them. In your personal world, awareness is an essential ingredient. Awareness of your spirit and body, awareness of your family and friends, awareness of your personal needs. None of these can be sacrificed if you intend to have a life. So you can never forsake them for work or one for the other. You can move back and forth quickly between these, and often even combine the activities around them, but you can't neglect any of them for long. Your personal life requires tight counterbalancing. Whether or not to go out of balance isn't really the question. The question is, do you go short or long? In your personal life, go short and avoid long periods where you're out of balance. Going short lets you stay connected to all the things that matter most and move them along together. In your professional life, go long and make peace with the idea that the pursuit of extraordinary results may require you to be out of balance for long periods. Going long allows you to focus on what matters most, even at the expense of other, lesser priorities. In your personal life, nothing gets left behind. At work, it's required. In his novel Suzanne's Diary for Nicholas, James Patterson artfully highlights where our priorities lie in our personal and professional balancing act. Imagine life is a game in which you are juggling 5 balls. The balls are called work, family, health, friends, and integrity, and you're keeping all of them in the air. But one day you finally come to understand that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it will bounce back. The other 4 balls, family, health, friends, integrity, are made of glass. If you drop one of these, it will be irrevocably scuffed, nicked, perhaps even shattered. Life is a balancing act. The question of balance is really a question of priority. When you change your language from balancing to prioritizing, you see your choices more clearly and open the door to changing your destiny. Extraordinary results demand that you set a priority and act on it. When you act on your priority, you'll automatically go out of balance, giving more time to one thing over another. The challenge then doesn't come one of not going out of balance, for in fact you must. The challenge becomes how long you stay on your priority. To be able to address your priorities outside of work, be clear about your most important work priority so you can get it done. Then go home and be clear about your priorities there so you can get back to work. When you're supposed to be working, work. And when you're supposed to be playing, play. It's a weird tightrope you're walking, but it's only when you get your priorities mixed up that things fall apart. Big ideas summary for Chapter 8. Number 1, think about 2 balancing buckets. Separate your work life and personal life into 2 distinct buckets, not to compartmentalize them, just for counterbalancing. Each has its own counterbalancing goals and approaches. Big idea number 2, counterbalance your work bucket. View work as involving a skill or knowledge that must be mastered. This will cause you to give disproportionate time to your one thing and will throw the rest of your workday, week, month, and year continually out of balance. Your work life is divided into 2 distinct areas, what matters most and everything else. You will have to take what matters to the extremes and be okay with what happens to the rest. Professional success requires it. Number 3, big idea. Counterbalance your personal life bucket. Acknowledge that your life actually has multiple areas and that each requires a minimum of attention for you to feel that you have a life. Drop anyone and you will feel the effects. This requires constant awareness. You must never go too long or too far without counterbalancing them so that they are all active areas of your life. Your personal life requires it. Start leading a counterbalanced life. Let the right things take precedence when they should and get to the rest when you can. An extraordinary life is a counterbalancing act. That's the end of Chapter 8. Thanks for joining Story Time with Andy. What did I learn today? I learned that balance is a myth and that we need to be comfortable with counterbalancing life and work and family and all of our other priorities. And that's the purpose of the one thing, is to find the one thing to focus on and everything else goes secondary. Okay? Well, thanks for watching. Slap me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you like. Leave a comment with what you learned from Chapter 8. And we'll see you on Chapter 9. Thanks so much.